when he went to the governor general, he was doing well in the polls, and he wanted like a really short election time because it's harder for other parties to change the public opinion in a really short amount of time, So he was
Hmm.
like, okay, I'm pretty confident I can get majority, so let me just get an election in in as soon as possible, But it's kind of uh like there has been a backlash, against him, because like people don't want to go to vote now, like everybody's stressed out. There's vaccine passports coming out in like few provinces. You don't know if there's going to be like what restrictions are going to be implemented. People are concentrating on getting vaccinated. There's a whole friction in society about whether to get vaccinated or not. So there's the
Hmm.
whole anti-vax movement. So like this is one of the last things people want to do, but yeah, but we'll talk more about this when we go into the party platforms. But the reason you know Justin Trudeau gave, as for why Canadians should go to the polls now, it feels like it wasn't a too good of a reason. It was just
Hmm.
he did this out of political expedience. And I think it's a lesson for liberals and liberal strategists, specifically the fact that there has been this backlash, and they're doing relatively poorly in the polls. I think this is a good lesson for them.
Yeah, I think he underestimated how Canadians would feel about him having us an election in the middle of the pandemic, right? He underestimated, and also I underestimated how the public would also react, because I did not think this would still be an issue like this many weeks into the campaign. I thought it would be something you deal with at the beginning, and then you can move on to another issue, because a lot has happened in Canadian politics. But this problem will not go away, and we saw it on
It's
the
getting worse.
it's getting worse, and we saw it on the TVA debate stage. Yves-François Blanchet, in the first few minutes, Yves-François Blanchet asked him, if you had a majority, would you have gone to an election right now? Because you're saying we need to go to an election because we want to offer we want to know what Canadians want. We want to see what they want.
Mm.
We want them to offer us a clear mandate. So Yves-François Blanchet threw it back at him. He's like, okay, if you had a majority, would you have gone to an election into an election? And I think even I'll say how he answered it later, but like even the way that question was asked, like if you're at home watching that, you're kind of like, probably not. You're answering the question way before, so you're like, you're probably not. And that's where you really see the political element and the political calculation for Justin Trudeau. And his rebuttal to Blanchette was, oh well, you guys have voted against us 4 times in the house, so you guys clearly wanted to go to an election 4 times. And then Iwasabasha was like, it's not because I vote against you 4 times that I want to go to an election 4 times. It's not like we can disagree in the house. That has nothing to, it's not one or the other, type thing. But we see that this problem won't go away. And Trudeau's response to that also, he also always mentioned, I think this is an important thing to mention, and we'll get into it in terms of like the anti-vax movement and all that. He keeps mentioning, why are we going to stop an election because only 20% of Canadians are not vaccinated? Close to 80% are vaccinated. So why are we going to sacrifice the 80% for the 20%? So it's an interesting rebuttal that he has, because that rebuttal kind of gets a certain faction of Canadians on his side. The faction of Canadians, that are vaccinated, the faction of Canadians that were like, we actually went out to get vaccinated and we're not seeing anything around us change. It seems like everything is staying the same. What are the benefits for us getting vaccinated? Obviously, the number one benefit is that we're going to be safe. Our families are going to be safe, etc. But there's some also selfish reasons too. You want to go back to a normal life. And for a long time, people were not seeing a normal life. So when Trudeau says, well, we're not going to sacrifice the 80% for the 20%, he's drawing a line in the stand, and that line really, it kind of gets him. It could potentially get him a support from a certain faction, but no, this problem is not going away at all.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting how he Trudeau has switched his tunes in the past couple of days. Like at the beginning of the campaign, when addressing anti-vax people, he would be like, "Oh, you have to listen to them. It's been a stressful year and a half. Like we have to deal with respect. I don't indulge hate and that kind of stuff, but we still have to listen to their opinions." But over the past couple of days, he's been really tough, and he's been saying, "Oh, these people want to like put your family in danger and stuff." Like he's been going tough on them, and like
Mhm.
there's also like I was reading an op-ed by an opinion writer, Altia Raj. I think you know her.
Mhm.
She hosted one of the debates in the last election. Like she wrote an opinion column, like I think yesterday, for like if for a website, a Quebec website. It was in French, and she
Mhm.
was arguing that Trudeau is using the Harper methods, of being a bit divisive, and not the method that he used in 2015 of sunny ways, like
Mhm.
rainbows and
Mhm.
unicorns, like we're all Canadians, we're all in this, blah blah blah, that kind of rhetoric. But he's more so now he's becoming a bit more divisive and saying, "Oh, Erin O'Toole is allowing these anti-vax people to have a to feel like as if they're supported." Erin
Mhm.
O'Toole's candidate, oh, Erin O'Toole has candidates who aren't vaccinated, that kind of rhetoric. And, like, I think he's on a defensive, and it's not the place where they want it to be, like, especially now that they released the modeling. I think the modeling was released, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, like on Friday, September 3rd, which is
Mhm.
yesterday. Well, the modeling is pretty bad. So like people will ask questions about why did you think this is the right time to do this? Especially because like Parliament was working fine. Let's let's not you know let's not take those excuses. Parliament
Yeah.
was working fine, even better than it usually works. There's a lot of cooperation. There's a lot of unanimous consent motions that passed under unanimous consent. That usually doesn't happen. Like, and
Mhm.
it's not supposed to happen because like you have an official opposition, and their job is basically to offer Canadian and an alternative vision of governance. So um like this was political expedience, and let's call it what it was. Like people are going through a pandemic. And plus, like, their platform, they're saying like we wanted to give Canadians like a say in what can like the vision of the country's future. But like their platform is kind of underwhelming. It's basically the same thing from the last election. There's just tweaks here and there, but there's not a lot of like new, like he's been saying this is a crisis that has fundamentally changed Canadian society, but there's no like fundamental proposals that will change Canadian society in his platform. There are a few new initiatives, and we'll have platforms on our Instagram page and on all our pages and even on our website. But like if you go through the party platforms in general, if you were to talk about the party platform, you wouldn't talk about the Liberal Party platform. You maybe talk about like the Conservative Party's platform, because like Erin O'Toole is trying something new. But like
Mhm.
that's why I understand why a lot of people are frustrated, and why the Liberals are doing badly in the polls
Mhm.
right now.
Yeah, and it's funny, like a lot of reporters have talked about how this is kind of unprecedented times in Canadian politics where you see like a real anger manifest itself not only online but actually protesters showing up to campaign events. Like it's a different type of anger. There's always protesters everywhere you go, but the anger, the obscenity that is being spewed when Trudeau's having his campaign events or Jack Meason's having his campaign events, like it's a next level that you and I have seen before, but that was in US politics, right? We always see it, we kind of get used to it, but we've never seen something like this in Canadian politics, right? Like this type of the anger, like that's the only way to really describe it, is real anger. And then this kind of, let's say, an organization to the way these protesters are showing up to literally every possible event they can get, at least across the street from where they can make their voices heard. They get there. They're everywhere. Like it's crazy to see. Like Trudeau actually had to cancel an event because he couldn't, guarantee the security of, he could guarantee his own security, but he can't guarantee the security of his fans or whatever, or supporters, right? He couldn't guarantee that, so he had to cancel the event. And the reporters that are on his campaign show were like, well, we've never seen this before. Like, this is something we haven't seen. And obviously Erin O'Toole has had to distance himself from these supporters, because just of the stuff that they're saying and etc. Like it's very bad, and it's something personally I haven't seen, because it's just not, when it comes to Canadian politics, it's not really who we are. But it just shows that I feel like we've kind of entered a new age where like social media is actually meeting real life. Like for a long time you had these little factions on social media. You even see it too sometimes in our sometimes political posts, like, or your YouTube or whatever. You see like those people that write paragraphs or whatever. You're like, yo, this guy's a bot, this person's a bot, this person's a bot. But they're not bots. They're really outside, and they're really angered. And it's interesting to see, at least at the beginning of the campaign, the different styles that there was. So Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh really went outside as much as they could, and went to the people and started holding campaign events outside. The conservative campaign of Erin O'Toole, they built a studio in Ottawa, like in a ballroom, and he was doing a lot of town halls. It was it's very interesting to see the contrast, because Erin O'Toole, in a sense, is in a controlled environment where you don't really see the protesters. It is what it is. It looks like it's all fine, and then you put a split screen of Justin Trudeau outside, protesters screaming, yelling, or whatever. And I think that is also part of what affects polls as well, because if you're watching from home, you're watching these protesters screaming at Justin Trudeau, and you were initially also mad at Justin Trudeau for what he's done with, pushing vaccination and all that. Like if you're part of that side of Canadians and you watch that from home, you're like, okay, I'm not the only one that believes that Justin Trudeau is a wrong guy and he's trying to push, government control and all that thing. Like it's a tough image. It's an image that liberals did not want, but that's what happens in campaigns, man.